What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron. We just finished up week 1. We just went through waiver wire claims, which means it's time to make some moves, wheel and deal. And right after week 1, when everybody's overreacting to every little piece of data, snap share, everything from week 1, it provides an opportunity to really take advantage of those, vast overreactions with just 1 week of data. So this is when you really want to be wheeling and dealing and get the best value possible after some people are probably overcorrecting with 1 week of data here. So with that being said, we're going to talk through now. We usually do buy and sell trade targets in season. It's week 1, and there were so many buys and so many sells for me that we're actually going to split it up into 2 videos. I think that we're only going to do this for week 1. Next week, it should be one singular video where I talk through buys and sells. But for this week, with so many players that I feel like are good trade targets, we're going to break it up into 2 videos. So with that being said, we're going to talk through 8 players I believe are must-buys heading into week 2. As always, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen.
Now, my first buy here is Rhamondre Stevenson. Now, I don't really understand the pessimism with Rhamondre Stevenson. He came in with, I think it was an illness or something, but something got reported Saturday night. He came in here, had just, I say just, but he had 14.9 PPR points, which is nice. 12 carries for 25 yards on the ground is not good, but that was against a really good Eagles front. Jalen Carter was sort of eating people alive in that game, and I think people are really spooked on Zeke Elliott. It seemed like early on, Ezekiel Elliott was very much in the mix, but when we sort of zoom out and look at the snap shares, Rhamondre was just fine. Like 74% of the snaps is all you can really ask for in the modern NFL. Very few running backs get to 75% of the snaps. All of the long down and distance work, all of the inside the 10 work. Now, I will say there was a 2-point conversion attempt where Zeke Elliott came in on the goal line. So they probably, this is what we projected. Zeke and Rhamondre splitting goal line work, Rhamondre being the main back with all of the receiving upside. And on this offense, an offense that just had like the 5th most yards in the NFL against a really good Eagles defense, I am very bullish on this offense. We have Bill O'Brien calling plays, not Matt Patricia. As bad as you think Bill O'Brien might be, he's an awful GM. As a play caller, we said this all offseason, but he's really not as bad as some make him out to be. He also led all running backs this week, Rhamondre Stevenson, with 34 routes. He tied for second among running backs with 6 targets. He is going to be a massive part of this passing game and challenge again for 80-plus targets. And that's really all we can ask for. To me, he is a very clear RB1. Now, when we talk about who we're selling this player for, this is how we're going to do it in these videos. I'm very curious to know how you guys are going to like this. We'll see if this sticks, but this is a resource that we've used every single year, but me in like the top right corner is a little bit different this year, but I think it would just be easier to kind of like show you guys around here. But this is Reddit adjusted fantasy football trade values. I believe this is peaked in high school. Back to my Reddit roots, for anybody out there who doesn't know, I used to post videos and articles to Reddit. I'd get downvoted and everyone hated them, but I came out with peaked in high school, had really good trade value charts. And I shout out Subvertadown all the time for kicker and defense rankings. Those are the 2 resources I've used ever since I've moved away from Reddit. So peaked in high school, they're good stock trade values. They aren't everything. They aren't the end-all, be-all, but they're at least good stock trade values where it's at least something, right? It's at least some sort of gauge of what the market is right now. And we scroll down to Rhamondre Stevenson. He's right here. And if I had Joe Mixon, I would trade him straight up for Rhamondre if I could. If I had Aaron Jones, I would trade him straight up for Rhamondre as well. I don't think Ayuk is necessarily a sell, but if somebody's going to give me an RB1 or Rhamondre Stevenson for Brandon Ayuk, and it's one of these teams that we build where it's 4 wide receivers, right? Wide receivers through the flex plus 1 or 2, and if it's plus 2 and Ayuk is one of your plus 2, I don't mind making a move like that on like a hero RB build or a build where you got screwed out of Jonathan Taylor. I don't mind a 2-for-1 either of like if you want to take your Alexander Madison and grab like a Christian Kirk, George Pickens, Cortland Sutton, add that to Alexander Madison, go get Rhamondre Stevenson. Definitely go try and do that. Now, our next trade target here, we have a couple of obvious ones. Now, I wanted to mix in a good amount of like luxury buys and also cheap buys so you could just sort of have guys all around the board here. Next up, I really like Travis Kelce. I don't know how acquirable he'll be, but if you have a manager who is in a really rough spot, maybe they're spooked on Kelce after he missed last week, and you can like fill a need that they might have. Like let's say they had J.K. Dobbins go down, and you can now like give them a running back to fix that hole, and you also add like a Hunter Henry or a Laporta, a Musgrave, something like that to sort of fill that hole. I think that's a decent idea. We talked with Tom Christ, the doctor of physical therapy, on Saturday. We're going to do that probably every week of the season. We were sort of just talking through what Travis Kelce's injury outlook was. He had a bone bruise, which just meant it was a swelling issue on a short week on Thursday Night Football. That's why they shut him down. It's not a long-term concern. He should be playing this next week. And we saw how awful tight ends were this week that Kelce, if you can get him on your team, you can have such a massive, massive advantage over the field right now, where the tight end one was Hunter Henry with 56 yards and a touchdown. Travis Kelce could double the tight end two in a given week. And if you can get him for any sort of discount, I think you absolutely should. Where if we look at this trade value chart and we look for Kelce on it, you can find, he's definitely valued highly here. But if you can find a way where I love the idea. I don't know if this is on the table, but if you have Garrett Wilson, you can sell him for Kelce. I probably would. I would also just try and package something. So we talked earlier, like if you could package something to Hunter Henry, like if you could go, I don't know. I don't think that this is really on the, available. But if you could take like Alexander Madison and bundle that with like T.J. Hawkinson, make something like that happen. I would just be exploring all of your options. I don't know how easy it's going to be to get him, but again, if you can find somebody that's in a rough spot, I would definitely kick the tires on Travis Kelce. Maybe you could do like, David Montgomery and a TJ Hawkinson, or, something like that, where you upgrade your tight end and you add a piece and you fill a need for them. If you can get Kelce on any kind of discount, go for it. I think to a lesser extent Andrews as well, though his injury is a little bit more frightening than Travis Kelce's. Next up, we have Tee Higgins here as a buy. This one we're not going to really go crazy on. It's pretty obvious. It was a rain game. Tee Higgins had 7 targets, 0 points. If a manager is out there and is very frustrated with Tee Higgins, feel free to swoop in. Where if we just look at where he is on this trade value chart, he is right here. I would trade Garrett Wilson straight up for Tee Higgins. I would probably trade. I'm trying to look at what the rest of this looks like. If you could do like Keenan Allen straight up for Tee Higgins, I probably would. If you could do Joe Mixon straight up for Tee Higgins, I probably would. If you could do Aaron Jones straight up for Tee Mixon, I probably would. Or Tee Higgins, I would. I know I'm like mixing words here. If you can add something to like a Najee Harris, like like a bench, like if you can do Najee Harris and Christian Kirk for Tee Higgins, I think that that's not a terrible idea. If you could do something similar to that with like James Cook, David Montgomery, I would. Just anything in that general vicinity. I wonder as well how much, like if you could do Zay Flowers and like, do you think you could do Zay Flowers and like Tyler Algier and get to Tee Higgins? I like anything among those lines. Try and buy low on Tee Higgins. He's going to be just fine. This offense is going to be just fine. He had a ton of volume. It was just a really weird game environment in the rain. I expect this Bengals offense to bounce back very easily here. Now, the next buy candidate we have as well is Josh Jacobs. Now, I imagine this one's pretty popular in a lot of shows out there, and that always kind of bothers me, to be honest, but Josh Jacobs is a very clear buy where he was the RB3 in expected points per game. He was expected for 17.7. He undershot that by 8.6. He had over an 80% snap share. Like, we've seen him be good. We've seen him have this exact role last year and crush and have like 19 points per game. That role is going to carry over here. This offense didn't seem as anemic as some thought. To me, Josh Jacobs is a very clear buy as a guy who's going to be an RB1 the rest of the way. And if you can take, like, I don't hate the idea. I mean, we're going to talk in the sell video. I have Nick Chubb as a sell. If you can sell Nick Chubb for Josh Jacobs in a piece, like if you can sell Nick Chubb for Josh Jacobs and get like Ayuk on top or get like a Debo on top, or even if you want to go down to like this area, and maybe you can get a Dameon Pierce on top, or you can get a Lockett or something. I love the idea of going down from Chubb to, say, a Josh Jacobs and sort of netting the difference there. I don't know if this is on the table, but if you can sell Garrett Wilson and maybe even just add a piece. Like if you could do Garrett Wilson like Raheem Mostert for Josh Jacobs, I would love something like that. If you could add a small little piece, like maybe you could do Algier and Tyler Algier and Brandon Ayuk and go get Josh Jacobs. I think those are all decent ideas. Again, Ayuk's not necessarily a sell for me, but if anybody's going to sort of pay an over-the-top price, I wouldn't mind jumping on that. But that's also because I have a good chunk of Brandon Ayuk. So if you have just one league and you really like Ayuk, go for it. But to me, he's a back-end wide receiver, too, that's going to have monster spike weeks. But, maybe as the season goes on, he outperforms that. Now, next up, we have Jahmyr Gibbs. I would imagine anyone that spent a 2-3 turn pick on him. I know that there are some guys out there who spent like the 210 or the 301, and it's like if you spend that price, you shouldn't be spooked yet. But I imagine there's a lot of guys out there that are like, oh my God, Jahmyr Gibbs had under 10 touches. He wasn't good. I spent a top 3-round pick on this guy. Oh my God, like what am I going to do? He had a 27% snap share. He had under 10 touches. Not great, but I would be trying to buy here. He somehow still, even though he had under 10 touches, he led the entire running back landscape this week in missed tackles forced on those like 9 touches, which is just insane. Second highest elusiveness rating this week behind Breece Hall. Third highest PFF grade among all running backs this week. The talent is very clearly there, and I can't make this clear enough. We don't draft rookies for their week 1 role. We know that rookies expand their role as the year goes on. If you think of Breece Hall, he was not the starting running back in week 1. If you think of Dameon Pierce, he had like 30% of the snaps in week 1 last year. If you think of Jonathan Taylor, he sucked until like week 10 of his rookie year and then was a monster. Same thing with Nick Chubb behind Carlos Hyde. Talent wins out in the end, and Jahmyr Gibbs showed his talent, and we're already getting quotes like this from Dan Campbell. He said Jahmyr Gibbs' low snap count against KC was by design. He wanted to let me get a glimpse of what the game looked like before unleashing him. He'll begin to get more touches now, so that was just beginning last night. So this was, to me, the lowest amount of touches, the lowest amount of snaps that he's going to get over the entire year. And it makes sense, right? When you think about the Lions, outside of, like, their last huge game was probably playoffs with Matthew Stafford. Like, opener at KC, the entire world watching. I don't think you really want in against a Steve Spagnuolo defense that's going to spend a lot of pressure. I don't think that you necessarily want Jahmyr Gibbs to be a huge part of that game plan in pass protection or just in key downs in general when you don't have the margin of error for rookie mistakes in that game. But now moving forward, I think that they host the Seahawks this week. Jahmyr Gibbs is probably a back-end RB2 with nothing but RB1 upside. Moving forward, if you could sell for Gibbs, and we look at this chart here, where does Gibbs end up here? Okay, so Gibbs is here. Like, if I could sell, I think I would still sell Joe Mixon straight up for Gibbs. Easily would actually do that. If I could sell Garrett Wilson straight up for Jahmyr Gibbs, I think I actually would. That's one that, like, this chart actually has you losing. I think I would. Maybe you could even get a piece on top of Gibbs for Garrett Wilson, but I'm not quite sure that's in there. If you could do Brandon Ayuk straight up for Jahmyr Gibbs, I would do that as well. If I could do a 2-for-1 of, like, let's say, if I could do like George Pickens and say a Dalvin Cook or, if I could do George Pickens and Brian Robinson and go get Jahmyr Gibbs, I would. Anything of that area of like a 2-for-1 or something in this range, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a nice buy low option right out of the gate here. Now, after that, we have Kenneth Walker, who really surprised me with his week 1 usage, where he had just 10.7 PPR points, and that's why I think that this is going to be a buy opportunity. But he had 4 catches on 5 targets, which is really encouraging. Now, he only ended up with 4 catches for 3 receiving yards, but the usage was really nice, where Kenneth Walker, I was kind of lukewarm on him. I understood that the profile heading into year 2 had a ton of upside, but my concern was the receiving role hasn't been there. His target share last year was, I believe, 7%, and he averaged like 1.8 catches per game. But if he's going to be out here with 4 catches in a game, and it's not even just that it was a fluky catch game, he actually had a ton of usage here, where this is a blurb from Dwayne McFarland. Dwayne McFarland does this utilization report every week where he tracks running backs utilization. It's on Fantasy Life. It is genuinely one of the must-read pieces of content out there, and it's completely free. Dwayne McFarland, make sure you check him out. But he said, I don't even know what bogarted means, if I'm going to be honest with you guys. But Walker bogarted 75% of the snaps and 71% of the rushing attempts against the Rams. His 59% route participation and 18% target share might be the most important data points of note. DJ Dallas still took the 2-minute offense, but Walker remained on the field for much of the long down and distance work with 43% of those snaps. Fellas, 59% of the routes and 18% target share. I don't know that sticks over an entire season, but even if it's like 55% plus of the routes and it's like 15% target share, that's absolutely massive. Where, again, last year he ran just 43% of the routes and had a 7% target share. So if this usage sticks in any way, he is going to be a very clear RB1 here, Kenneth Walker. It was a weird game script. They were losing to the Rams. I think there are better days ahead here. I think he's actually a smash play versus the Lions this week. So we'll see. Now, in terms of like what I'm selling to get Walker, he comes out, okay, so like right around here. If I could sell, I don't think that you can sell Najee, but if you can add to Najee, David Montgomery, Rashad White, Alexander Madison, if you can add to any of them, like maybe you can add like a Puka Nacua to one of them and get to Kenneth Walker. If you could add like I don't know if you could maybe sell like I don't know how much can you add to Michael Pittman. Like if you could do Michael Pittman and add like say Brian Robinson, or do Michael Pittman and add say like Cam Akers, and that gets you to Kenneth Walker, I would love that. Again, if I could add a little something on top of like Najee, Montgomery, Rachaad White, Alexander Mattison, Miles Sanders as well, if I could do any of those and like plus a wide receiver, I would absolutely love that. Now, our more budget options here in terms of our buys is going to start with Elijah Moore. Now, he didn't really do much. He had like I think under 10 PPR points, but the usage was amazing where, you know, maybe you took a hit and Deontay Johnson was a wide receiver for you. I'm in a couple spots like that. And, you know, you go from, we love having wide receivers through our flex plus another like one or two. And let's say Deontay Johnson goes down and now you're sort of scrambling to have some depth for that flex spot. I think Elijah Moore is the perfect buy low as a guy who can be like a wide receiver 3 flex type the rest of the year. Where week 1, this was really, really encouraging. Again, this is from the utilization report by Dwayne McFarland. He said the Bengals didn't put up much of a fight, allowing Cleveland to rest most of their skill position starters in the fourth quarter outside of Deshaun Watson. Once you remove the final quarter of play, Moore's numbers look even more potent. 87% of the routes, 27% target share, 7% of the rush attempts. This is a small sample, but those are wide receiver 1 worthy numbers, and we have seen Moore flash big-time ability before. Over his final 7 games as a rookie, he was a wide receiver 1. Now, we're not saying he's a wide receiver 1, but the usage looks kind of like a wide receiver 1, which is really exciting. They're lining him up in the backfield. They're giving him like a 25% plus target share. It was a weird rain game. None of the Bengals even got home. Amari Cooper didn't really get home. Nobody really scored well in this game. Outside of like Deshaun Watson, I think he had a rushing touchdown here, but he was the wide receiver 24 in expected points per game this week, which expected points per game is just your usage, right? In Elijah Moore's case, your carries, your targets, your ADOT, all of that, your red zone targets. He should have been the wide receiver 24 just based off of volume alone in a weird game that he didn't even play 4 quarters in. So I gotta be honest, I'm very excited about Elijah Moore here, and I think you can buy very low here where he didn't really put up a great stat line. No one's really excited about him. Like, to me, he's a very high-end wide receiver 3 moving forward, and you don't really have to pay much for him. I'm telling you, like, if you need a wide receiver 3 / like flex type on your team, please go kick the tires on Elijah Moore. Where if we look at like the range he's in here, I don't think this is on the table, but if somebody out there really likes Deontay Johnson and you could just offload Deontay Johnson for Elijah Moore, I would. If I could offload any of these running backs for Elijah Moore, I would. Like, just anything in this range. If I could do Puka Nacua for like Elijah Moore in a piece, if Puka Nacua has that kind of hype in your league, I would do that as well. If I could do Tyler Algier, I think even though that Puka Nacua and Tyler Algier are below Elijah Moore here, I think that they actually have enough hype off waivers that you could get like another piece on top of Elijah Moore. But I wouldn't mind something like that. I wouldn't mind selling any of these top guys either. Like, if you could sell a Najee, Montgomery, Rachaad White, Alexander Mattison, Miles Sanders for Elijah Moore and a piece on top, like maybe Elijah Moore and like maybe one of these tight ends, or Elijah Moore and say like a Khalil Herbert, like buying a little bit low there. Anything like that, I don't know. I would really kick the tires, see how scummy you could get in terms of like, I think even Zay Jones for Elijah Moore is in the cards right now. I know that he's like listed all the way down here, but I don't think that that's too far off, to be honest. Now, I'll also say, just from like quick glancing here, I'm not going to have these guys as official buys, but very much like Jaylen Warren, if you can get him for like, this was a guy going like 9th round and his role like remains unchanged. I think honestly these 3 running backs, Warren, Gibson, and Charbonnet, they were all top 10, top 9 round picks. If you can get them for cheaper than that now after like one quiet week, definitely go ahead there. Now, our last buy here might be too little too late for DeAndre Swift in terms of a buy. Now, I'm going to be honest. I wrote this a little bit last night and a little bit this morning. Since then, Kenneth Gainwell missed practice twice, and now he's officially listed out. The point of buying here was that Kenneth Gainwell was trending towards not playing, and that you should pounce on DeAndre Swift while the vibes are down. Now the cat's sort of out of the bag with DeAndre Swift, that he is going to have some sort of role. Now, let's just read this before we go any further. It says, Sirianni, DeAndre Swift can carry the load and or be a rotational piece of backfield because of his skill set. Kenneth Gainwell isn't expected to play Thursday with a rib injury. Sirianni said, yeah, I think he can play both roles, no question about it, in terms of like the Sanders versus the pass catching. He'll be in that role sometimes when he carries a load for the game, and he'll be in the role sometimes like he was in last game. Again, we just don't ever want to come out with him only having those many touches. I'm assuming he's talking about Swift having 2 touches this week. Just kind of how the flow went in the game. We had things called for him, but sometimes the ball doesn't go for him in a certain way. That's just the way the defense takes it away. Now, you can always get it to him by just handing it off to him, but I see him being able to play any role that he's in because of the type of back. I mean, he's saying, Sirianni's giving us nothing there. I don't know what, like, that was just a whole lot of nothing. But essentially, Gainwell's not going to play. Swift is in the mix. If you have an owner out there that's still very, very low on Swift, I think you can try and swoop in and still buy. I think that some people are even scared to play. I think most Swift owners are still scared to play him even without Gainwell on Thursday night because you don't know how much Boston Scott's going to have. You don't know how Rashad Penny's going to have. And that makes sense. I mean, it's not very, very clear, but it is also a smash spot where they are playing, I believe, the Vikings. They're playing the Vikings, and DeAndre Swift could just be the main back here and just have a huge week. And then from there, you could decide to either sell high on DeAndre Swift or just keep him the rest of the year. To me, he's a startable RB3 this week. And again, if you can get him for super, super cheap, I know that his price has probably gone up since then, but like on this trade value chart here, he's so low. And again, I can't imagine that anybody out there with Swift is like psyched to have him, even with this Gainwell news. So if you can turn a Mims, if you can turn any of these guys, I mean, I like Burks, man, but if you can turn Burks into DeAndre Swift, if you have an extra tight end and like you can turn one of these guys into DeAndre Swift, like 100% go for it. Again, I don't know. I don't know where he's going to be valued now with the Gainwell stuff, but if the owner is still pessimistic on Swift and looking to sell low, definitely try and kick the tires, low ball him a little bit and kind of see what you can do. Now, that is going to be it for this video. That was 8 players that you must buy before week 2. As always, I'm going to update my rest of season rankings actually tonight. So if you'd like to see, I'm trying to buy Swift, who does Ron have ranked below Swift or above Swift rest of season, that'll be on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You get my rest of season rankings, my weekly rankings, my waiver wire article, my exclusive start-sit stream every Sundays, every Sunday on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It'll be in the description, comment section down below. If you can't support there, it's all good. Just leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm